Mandela Barnes, candidate for governor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start with kind of what the news of the day is when it comes to one of your competitors. Do you think that Sarah misled voters by not sharing this information sooner? And do you believe that these discrepancies, she knew about them before last week? And if that's true, what do you think that says about her?
Well, I can't speak to what her campaign knew or didn't know. She did come forward, and the facts are the facts. People are able to make that decision for themselves. If they feel misled, then that person is certainly entitled to feel that way. But I am focused on running my race. I'm focused on doing whatever I can do to properly communicate to every single person across this state about our plan to make things better. That's what it comes down to. A lot of people running the primary, and as I said, early on, we are focused on the general election. We're focused on Tom Tiffany in November.
Do you think that this can help your campaign in any way, or?
Well, that remains to be seen. Now, whether this happened or it didn't happen, we were going to still continue to show up and not take a single vote for granted. We're going to run hard, regardless of whatever circumstances may arise in anybody else's campaign. That's, the thing about being as focused as possible. There's a very real threat with Tom Tiffany, and we need to take that seriously. And that is exactly what my campaign is going to be focused on, to make sure that he never becomes governor.
And switching to your campaign, what is your biggest priority if you're elected governor?
So my biggest priority is urgency, because that's what people have been looking for. Folks have been dealing with a tough time for far too long. And this urgency runs the gamut. Any number of issues: healthcare, education, the environment, you name it. We have been dealing with a challenging set of circumstances. And as we look at this affordability crisis that's gripped the entire country, but especially here in Wisconsin, a lot of folks realize that this isn't anything new. They've always had it bad, despite playing by the rules, despite being done or doing everything they've been told that will help them get ahead. They've still come up short, and that's the reality that we're fighting to change. We are fighting to make sure that any person who works hard in this state will be able to get ahead and have access to the American dream, will be able to earn a living wage, to be able to retire comfortably, to be able to take a vacation once in a while. And that reality has been non-existent for far too many people for far too long, and it's because of the completely broken system that we're operating under, a system that allows the wealthy to continue to get wealthier, a system that has allowed for the world's first trillionaire. And we are going to work here in Wisconsin to break up that system by taxing billionaires, taxing the ultra wealthy, these out-of-state corporations that have made life hard for people.
And you've talked a lot about expanding healthcare. Badger Care is obviously expected to be impacted by the big, beautiful bill, $205.5 million annually due to those work requirements that are going to have to be coming into place. That's according to the Wisconsin Department of Health and Services. How do you specifically plan to expand Badger Care when the budget's already expected to balloon because of the administrative cost for those work requirements?
Well, we do, we are expecting change in things when it comes to Badger Care expansion, but this has to be a priority because it's been 15 years. And for the 15 years we haven't expanded Badger Care, tens of thousands of people across this state. And I guess if you look at the whole 15 years, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have gone without health care because they simply can't afford it. Think about how many people have gone into medical debt, medical bankruptcy, the number of people that have increased the risk pool, which drives up costs even for folks on the private insurance market. This is completely unsustainable. It is irresponsible that the legislature has played politics and held this up for so long.
You were kind of discussing your public buy-in option, correct?
Yeah, public option for Badger Care to help stabilize the system. Having people buy into it, we make the system stronger. But this is specifically for folks who are in between jobs, people who are starting a small business, people who are working in the gig economy that don't have access to the benefits that they deserve. And this is ultimately how we make Wisconsin a much healthier place, and this is also how we make healthcare more affordable for every single person here.
What does that look like? Is that just a tax that everyone pays on their paycheck?
No, not for a public option. Okay. A public option would make Badger Care available as any other health insurance plan for a person to be able to buy into it. So it's about having that choice to be able to purchase health insurance, and this is also a way for us to help create more competition in the market to also drive down costs. When there's less competition and fewer options, that leads to increased costs for people.
How do you plan on doing that, especially if Democrats don't get the trifecta and you have to work with Republicans who have been told, who have said in the past that they're going to cut Badger Care due to not getting as much federal funding?
Yeah, so we are fighting for a majority in both the Assembly and in the Senate, but we have to negotiate, and there has to be a fine line drawn in the sand. And the reality is, this impacts Republican voters. I've had a conversation with the former Democratic governor of Louisiana who expanded their Medicaid program through executive order. Now, we have limits here in Wisconsin to be able to do that. That's why it hasn't happened yet. And when you do anything through executive order, you run the risk of your successor overturning it with a stroke of a pen. And when we were talking, he said this was something we took into account. But I can guarantee you, my Republican successor did not overturn our expansion of Medicaid because it's his voters that depend on it. And that is the case here. And I'm willing to travel all across the state as I continue to travel across the state. When I served alongside Governor Evers, when we were selling the state budget, I went all across Wisconsin. But I can tell you, I am more than happy to show up in anybody's district as governor talking about our plan to expand healthcare and lower costs for people. And I'm happy to have that conversation with any legislator who feels that it is worth more to them to play politics than to do the right thing.
And Democrats do struggle in some of these more rural areas. Political experts have said that rural areas are leaning more Republican than they are Democrat. How do you plan to reach out to many of those voters who see you as just a kid from Milwaukee that, you know, maybe might not have the same interest, their interest at heart the same way you do as the city?
I can tell you that's actually motivating for me to show up. Nobody's traveled the state as much as I have in this race, primary or general. I've been to all parts of Wisconsin. And there are folks, like Tom Tiffany, who might show up in Milwaukee when it's convenient or when he's called upon to do so. But I've spent very deliberate time in rural communities all across Wisconsin. And as I've traveled the state as lieutenant governor and I've traveled the state during this entire campaign, I look forward to continuing to travel the state to build those bridges, to make those inroads with communities who may have a warped sense of things in Milwaukee, who may only know what they've been told or know the things that have been politicized. And I'm happy to bring that reality to communities all across this state because when it's all said and done, everybody's looking for the same things. People want a good school to send their children to. People want a job that puts food on the table. Folks want to go to a doctor, not worry about a surprise bill. And that is a reality that has been consistently denied to people regardless of where you live, but especially in some of these rural communities that are represented by Republicans who show up every single day during election time and say they're fighting on behalf of the people, but in reality are leaving people behind, leaving schools underfunded, leaving healthcare deserts, making it more difficult and challenging for our family farmers to be able to get ahead. And issues like the tariffs, issues like Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran that's driving up fuel costs has completely destabilized rural economies. This is what Tom Tiffany is responsible for because anytime Donald Trump has made these steps, took these initiatives, has taken these initiatives to make life more difficult, not once has he said enough is enough. He's completely left the district he already represents behind. And if he's already done that to the district he represents, he will absolutely do it to the entire state of Wisconsin. That's what we can't afford.
Well, and data centers are a big concern, not only for rural Wisconsinites, but also those who live in the city. What is your stance on data centers, especially as some are calling for a moratorium on them, while others are saying they are the economic driver of the time that we live in?
Yeah, I can tell you, if data centers cannot play by the rules and do right by communities, then they can't be built. And I can tell you, if a community rejects a data center, that's the end of the story. When I talk about guardrails that we need in place, these guardrails need to protect air and water quality. These guardrails need to ensure that nobody's energy rates are going to increase and there should be no subsidies for data center construction. If they can hit those benchmarks, that's a different conversation. If they can hit those benchmarks, then we open up a conversation to community benefits agreement where there's renewable energy, putting more energy back into the grid, where we're talking good paying union jobs in-state from Wisconsin, a Wisconsin workforce that's building them, but only if those benchmarks are hit. And these guardrails, doesn't matter if it's 1 year, it doesn't matter if it's 5 years. If they can't adhere to this set of standards that we will require from any other business, then they don't belong. We're just asking them to be good neighbors. And folks have called for a moratorium, but nobody's introduced a bill to implement a moratorium.
Do you support a moratorium?
Well, like I said, this doesn't matter if it's 1 year or 5 years. I'm talking about the guardrails that should be in place. We can get into semantics all you want to. Anybody who said they support a moratorium, we still haven't seen the bill introduced. There's an opportunity to do so now. And if the argument is that there's no support in the legislature now for a moratorium, then how do you expect support from the legislature to just pop up out of nowhere come January 2027?
Well, and with those concerns over data centers comes the concerns for rising utility costs. You've pledged to freeze rates by only appointing PSC members who pledge to not raise fees. What do you say to people who argue that's a bad policy because it could hinder some of these power companies' abilities to make needed upgrades, in turn potentially giving everyday Wisconsinites, less reliable service?
Well, what I can tell you right now is that rates have gone up, but what has also gone up is executive compensation. What has also happened is ratepayer dollars being used for lobbying and being used for political donations. That should not be the case. The money is there, and I understand the capital improvements that need to take place and the investments in renewable energy. Now, this can happen. There's money to do so. We can't say that the money isn't there if we've seen these exorbitant executive compensation packages, these six-figure bonuses. In some instances, people send their pay increase by up to 3 times as much as they were paying or being paid. So look, I agree that we need to ensure that the capital improvements can take place, and they are. But you can't say that there's no money or justify these expenses if you're using them or if you're using ratepayer dollars to fund political donations. This is why we get trapped in this cycle, because you get utility companies, they put money into campaigns, they get people elected, and then you have elected officials who are beholden to energy companies instead of the people that they were elected to represent. My fight is always going to be to put people first, and understanding that yes, they are delivering energy, they are delivering electricity and gas to households, but with that comes a responsibility to do the right thing by the community you serve.
Do you support the push in Milwaukee to have its own utility company?
Well, that's a different conversation, the city of Milwaukee, and I don't know what the city of Milwaukee's finances are to be able to do so. So that's one that the city of Milwaukee needs to figure that out. That is an issue of local control. They can have that conversation, but it does bring up an important conversation because people are frustrated with energy costs continuing to rise. People are frustrated with the status quo. People are frustrated with the way things are, and that is why that conversation is happening. But that's one that the city or any city across Wisconsin, that is their conversation to have.
Do you think that data centers are paying their fair share when it comes to some of these capital improvement projects that are inevitably going to need to happen if data centers are built and consuming more energy? Or
well, it's hard to tell right now, but I don't support any subsidizing of data centers. So when it comes to paying their fair share, the proof is in the pudding that they're relying on the public to be built, which makes no sense. I mean, we're talking about the wealthiest companies that ever exist. We're talking about trillion-dollar companies that are relying on the public dime. These trillionaire companies or these trillion-dollar companies shouldn't get a dime of welfare. This is corporate welfare that has led to communities not having the resources that they need. This is what leads to our schools being chronically underfunded. These tech companies, these social media giants, they are not starving for cash, and they're coming and taking more of yours.
Speaking of public education, it has some problems here in the state. In many other interviews, you've said that you would fully fund public schools. What do you mean by that, especially as people are concerned about their property taxes?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the concern about property taxes will be alleviated if the state met its fair share commitment, the full funding commitment of 2/3 in state aid to our public schools. That's not the case right now. And for every year that we go on without fully funding our public schools, that burden is left on property taxpayers. Every single year, every election cycle, school districts across the state, and it's like an historic number every single time, that are going to referendum to fund basic essential services, not to get anything new, not to build a new stadium, not even to build a new science lab. This is to keep teachers in the classroom. This is to keep the lights on in the building. This is to keep the doors open. And so fully funding public schools is a priority of mine. And you talked about some of the challenges our schools are facing. And the challenges they are facing is because a lack of adequate, fair, and equitable funding. I'm a proud Milwaukee Public School graduate, and I can tell you some of the biggest challenges our schools face is unfortunately what happens before and after the bell rings. All of our students aren't showing up to school on level playing field. We have a rate of child poverty that is significantly higher in cities like Milwaukee than they are in other parts of the state. And this truly impacts a student's educational journey. We have to address the root causes to education. We have to make sure that every child shows up to school prepared to learn. And unfortunately, that is not the case right now. We have housing insecurity, food insecurity, lack of access to healthcare, physical and mental health. All these things need to be addressed so that we can truly, we can use a more flatline rubric to grade how our schools are or are not performing.
Do you think the quality of instruction in the classroom or after-school programs need to improve? And if so, what would your administration do to improve those things?
Yeah, I can tell you that even going back to the last question, suppose you have one curriculum and students are showing up to school, slept somewhere they weren't expecting the night before, showing up to school hungry. It won't matter what that curriculum is. It won't matter if there's different subject matter or different teaching process. Think about children who have poor vision and have never been to an eye doctor. If they can't see, chances are they can't read. Doesn't matter if you have a tutor. Doesn't matter if you have the highest professional educator in that classroom. Maybe the highest level professional educator may be able to diagnose what's going on, but we as a state, we as a society, truly haven't done the job at diagnosing those root causes. Now, when it comes to curriculum, I do want every child to have access to high quality education. And we do have schools that provide high quality education in this state. And if we have high quality education provided at any one school in Wisconsin, that should be the reality for all of our schools. And that's the future I'm fighting for.
You and Francesca Hong are the youngest candidates running. You're the youngest candidates that would be, or people that would be governor in modern history. But some people say that you're the same ideologically. What would you say sets yourself apart from her? And especially as she's gone on some controversial podcasts that many people are saying is now making her unelectable.
So the difference between whether it's myself, her, or any other candidate is my lived experience. I'm the only person in this state that's uniquely prepared for this moment, having lived through some of the most difficult and challenging circumstances, having experienced some of the worst, unfortunately, that this state has had to offer, but also having a chance to enjoy some of the best that this state has to offer. I know that there's so much more out there for communities like mine, for families like the one I was born into, for people all across the state who have been desperate for more. We need somebody who's going to show up and fight for other families as if they were fight for their own. And that's the fight I've been involved in. I've taken on the tough fights, and taking on those tough fights, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And I can tell you that those fights are worth taking on because there's so much more that is left to be desired for far too many people across Wisconsin. And people know me because I've shown up. I haven't just shown up in my own community. I haven't just shown up in Milwaukee or Madison. I've shown up all across the state consistently, and they have put their trust in me time and time again. And I'm asking for folks to put their trust in me once more to make sure that we usher in that new era of opportunity that doesn't leave a single person behind in Wisconsin.
Do you think being younger gives you an edge?
That remains to be seen, but with the youth, I still show up with the experience, having served as lieutenant governor, having been in the state legislature, and having had a very real focus on state policy as an organizer. So age, I think that's not even, I don't even think that's the most important part. I think the most important part is that I've consistently shown up more than anybody. My track record is longer. My track record, I'm not falling apart. I'm still going because I'm consistent. Even if the sign falls, I'm standing up and I'm showing up for everybody across this state.
It's fine, my mic fell off too. So, overall, Why should people elect Mandela Barnes as the next governor of Wisconsin?
Well, I will want people to show up to vote for me because I do recognize the challenges that we're experiencing, not even from a political sense. I know the challenges people are dealing with from a deeply, deeply personal sense. I've dealt with a very challenging economy that's displaced me from my job. I've had to go apply for energy assistance. I've been on food share before. I've racked up medical debt. Everything that I talk about in this campaign, everything that I talk about that I would like to be or like to see fixed or changed here in Wisconsin is based on personal experience. The high school I attended, chronically underfunded, chronically under-resourced. Many of the challenges that have been faced across the broader society I experienced at a young age, having lost friends to gun violence, having seen what it means when people in your neighborhood were there one day and not the next because they got swept up in the criminal justice system. I've seen what it means to have a lack of opportunity, but I've also seen what it means to be on the other side of that coin, to be in a place where people do have their needs met, and we see so many of these circumstances be alleviated just because they had opportunity. And I know firsthand more than any person who is running about the deep and real need for opportunity to be expanded all across Wisconsin. And that's exactly why I'll fight for it, because I believe in this state. I know what this state can be, but I just want to make sure that this state is at its most full potential for every single person that calls this place home.
Mandela Barnes, Democratic candidate for governor. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.